in looking at what we do as teachers, we can't really adopt a one-size-fits-all practice for teaching. And that's commonly discussed in UDL when we talk about the benefits of UDL. And we really need to look at what are the principles of universal design for learning. And we talk about multiple methods of representation, multiple methods of engagement, multiple methods of action and expression. And really we might think, what does that mean for me as a teacher? What do I have to start from scratch again? But actually you don't. Really when you break it down, you're looking at how are you sharing your information? What kinds of media are you using? Are you mixing it up a little bit? Are you giving choice in assessment? Is it always a written assessment? Are there opportunities for oral assessment? When the students are working in the classroom or in the lecture theatre, is it individual or are there opportunities to talk to others and maybe engage in discussion and collaborate? So really, a lot of what UDL is advocating is what teachers are doing, but they just don't name it.
In particular, I'm interested in the idea of multiple means of engagement and its focus on optimizing the value and relevance of our teaching to sustain student interest. So from an EDI perspective, this prompts us to think about representing diversity in syllabi and ensuring that our students can see themselves represented in course content and course curricula. Ways that we could do this would be, for example, to revise our reading lists to ensure that they are diverse in terms of the authors who are represented, diverse in terms of gender, cultural background, ethnicity, and so on. And also to use diverse examples to give life to what we are teaching. In some subjects, this kind of broad diversity might not be possible, or it might be easier in some subjects than it is in others. But where there is an imbalance, for example, in the reading list, it is important that we give our students the opportunity to critique that and to comment on the fact that everyone on the reading list is of the same gender, for example, and to think about how that might influence the way they are then interacting with the subject matter and learning about that particular subject. So ultimately, for me, I think inclusive teaching and learning that's based on universal design for learning concerns both how we teach and how the students access the material, as well as what we teach and what sources we rely on.
The impact that I was looking for was positioning themselves like outside the class. But actually I realized it's a powerful tool to be used inside the class as well, because it helps to create this class community. And I was hoping them to acknowledge all the diversity in the group, but also it helps them to kind of accept different points of view, especially when they are working in group, and also to kind of celebrate the diversity.
In our virtual learning environment, it's really important to us that it's a space where accessibility is first. It's not an afterthought. We really wanted it to make sure that in the training that we provide for our lecturers and our students, that accessibility is very much embedded within that.
Like for example, in my back home, it was. We don't have disability services, we don't have UDL, so it was a bit hard if you are with a disability to make it, unless the teacher is just making an effort to make it possible for you to make the content accessible. So yeah, I think UDL made a big difference for me, like a huge difference. So I'm never worried, that's the thing. Before I would worry, how am I supposed to do and overcome my disability with, like if I don't have another option. UDL is about the 1+, like the rule 1+, like, or +1, I mean. So if there is only one way you can make it easier for students, so why wouldn't you give them this option? So that's what I had here as an experience. So I'm always having an extra like possibility to represent what I know. For example, through my supervision, usually you get, when you send something, you receive a feedback at the end. So the supervisors offered to give me feedback that's audio instead of just writing it in the margins of the word. And I was like, it's fine, it's okay for me to write it. But I was given this chance. So whenever I feel like, oh, I can't do it anymore, so they can shift towards that because they are open to it. They proposed this at the beginning. So that's how it was really helpful. It's still helpful.
For me, I guess UDL is really, it's that flexibility and that inclusion. So it's about giving that choice and giving, understanding that diversity that we have in our student population, and it's about accommodating for that. And for me, I guess coming from a disability background, I always see that accessibility front and center as part of it. So for me, it's about that flexibility, it's about understanding that variability, and it's having things like accessibility, which benefit much more than students with disabilities.
In keeping with the UDL principle of multiple means of action or expression, students are offered the option of submitting their reflections in whatever form they wish, written form, audio form, or audiovisual form. This has necessitated me rewriting assignment briefs, adding instructions around content, length, and submission. It's also important for me to ensure fairness and standards, as well as alignment with learning outcomes. But students know that they have such choices in assignment types from the outset of their modules.
The pleasure in having multiple means of expression is that you get to review different types of assignments, and as a teacher that makes the prospect of grading more interesting. So that's been a positive impact for me personally. And for the students, so I've gone on to implement this particular change in several modules. So sometimes students would previously have had to write an essay. Now they can write a blog post, or they can maybe do an online presentation instead. For the students, this really has been a really positive change, because it means that those who maybe find writing more difficult have other ways of showing that they've learned, and yet they're still stretching themselves and they're still meeting the learning outcomes. So it's still really working as a learning experience and activity for them. And I think most of all what's positive about these changes is that because students choose what means of assessment they're going to take for any given assignment, they really have more ownership of their learning, and I think that they're happier with the experience.